Hi everyone, my name is Alex and I'm here to present our mining study into Stack Overflow questions on computer vision services. The topic of a machine learning spectrum is gaining traction in the software engineering community, especially if we look at it from the software developer's perspective. On the left-hand side, developers can set up a training infrastructure and implement machine learning algorithms themselves, but this can be quite a challenge without expertise. An abstraction on top of this would be to use a machine learning framework like TensorFlow to plug in pre-trained models. However, it still requires a basic understanding of machine learning principles. A different approach would be to use a cloud-based service that provides the power of ML through RESTful API endpoints. Through the use of these cloud-based endpoints that developers are already accustomed to, such services have been dubbed as developer-friendly machine learning. We've seen an explosion of these types of services, especially in computer vision. The marketed promise is that developers can tap into human-level intelligence by using these services. For example, they can build custom AI applications without a PhD, or they don't need to build, maintain, or upgrade deep learning pipelines to get the job done. This sounds too good to be true, so we'll look into a few pitfalls. In short, the state-of-the-art of computer vision isn't perfect. These services can mislabel images when noise is introduced. And similarly, they can fail when even a single pixel is modified. They are also easy to fool through the use of adversarial examples. And longitudinal studies of these services have found evolutionary and ontological issues as well. Our aim is to support vendors through improved service design and documentation. We want to achieve this by looking at the root cause of the problems faced by developers as they use these services. One way to do this is by analysing Stack Overflow posts. As you can see here, the growth of posts talking about these services is increasing. Thematically, we find that developers are discussing similar issues. Firstly, they're unaware of ML vocabulary, such as what score or confidence means. They're frustrated with non-deterministic results. They're unaware of the limitations behind these services, and they're seeking better documentation as well. We formulated 2 research questions to investigate this further. Firstly, we wanted to see how developers misunderstand these services through Stack Overflow questions. And secondly, we wanted to see if the distribution of the types of issues are similar to those found in existing studies. Our method started by defining a list of 229 intelligent services. We optimized our search query and extracted 21,000 results. We refined these questions to computer vision services exclusively. With multiple coders, we classified each question to an issue type. And lastly, we compared the distribution of these classifications against prior studies using a chi-square test. To classify these issues, we used 2 existing classification taxonomies. On the left is a classification taxonomy around software documentation issues, and on the right is a classification taxonomy on generalized Stack Overflow questions in the domain of Android issues. Of course, as we're not the original authors of these papers, we provided our interpretations of both taxonomies. When we compare the documentation issues to existing literature, we find that there is a greater demand for further documentation. Developers also question the accuracy of computer vision service documentation more than they do in existing SDKs. They're also concerned about the usefulness of this documentation more than they do in the prior work. Now, when we contrast our issues against a more mature domain, like Android issues, we see that there are a lot more questions on error handling. Regarding API usage, we find that developers question the behavior, function, and limitation of these services as well. Lastly, basic ML principles are largely misunderstood, suggesting that there is conceptual misunderstanding. In essence, mature domains like Android show a large distribution difference in the types of issues developers present on Stack Overflow. As an interpretation of our findings, we looked at classifying a sample of posts into dimensions of the Bloom's and Solo learning taxonomies. A large number of posts fell into the lower constructs, suggesting that many issues can be alleviated by improved service documentation. However, some developers are asking questions at the higher levels of these constructs, and therefore improved educational practices are needed. So a mixture between the two will be needed moving forward. In terms of the recommendations to vendors, we suggest descriptions of these services be more explicit. They aren't the silver bullet, and we shouldn't be getting developers' expectations set too high. Vendors should also clarify the use cases for these services. Are these the right tools for the right job? Furthermore, what remains the responsibility of the developer? How can their app integrate with this service in the best possible way? In essence, stop oversimplifying the nature of these services and don't make it sound just like another cloud service. As for developers, we suggest that they develop a better understanding of the context before diving in. How do these services evolve, and does it actually do what they're after? They should also learn up on the vocabulary needed to use such APIs, making sure that all service documentation is thoroughly read and understood. We also emphasize that developers should explore further education to attain a greater appreciation of ML when attempting to use these services. On that note, we have a few recommendations for educators, namely that we should start developing for the next generation of software engineers on a high level aspects on ML. For example, we need to develop a crash course aimed at undergraduates in ML and AI to highlight the nuances of these services. This may involve the need for pre- and post-processing, the instability of these services, the specific algorithms that empower the APIs, and we also need to educate on model evolution and the impact this has on the quality of systems. Lastly, for us researchers, we should repeat a study like ours in a few years to assess how this space is evolving and whether or not developers have attained a greater maturity of intelligent services. We can also mine API usage patterns from open source software to see the technical challenges of implementation at the code level as well. That's all from me. Thanks for listening, and I'm glad to answer any questions.